very much, Cyril. Thank you very much, Cyril. I will first welcome everyone to Subworking Group 2.2, Information Sharing, Interagency Collaboration, and Policy Formulation. My name is Bill McGlynn. I am with the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. I have been working with the Synthetics Coalition team since the beginning. And I will share my screen now. One moment.
And we can see your screen. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to say just a few words before we start about some issues that we've been focusing on lately in the coalition. One has been the private sector engagement plan. We have focused so far on the 6 areas that we have been advised, and many of you who are much more expert certainly than I have identified as important to the effort on synthetic drugs. We are also going to make a special effort to reach out to 2 other areas, pharmaceutical and artificial intelligence companies and related fields. I wanted to also say a few words about the structure of what we hope will enhance our private sector engagement. This is on the coalition website at www.globalcoalition.us. But just to briefly discuss it, some outreach to the private sector has already begun, and we are certainly encouraging countries to have their own national dialogue with their private sector. The United States had a meeting with social media companies on February 9 and met with the companies Snap, Meta, and Discord. We're very happy that the International Narcotics Control Board will be hosting a Tech Against Trafficking meeting in Vienna next month. And the other points briefly describe the next steps in that private sector dialogue. And we look forward to hearing how those dialogues go, as well as any comments and suggestions on how we proceed. This is kind of a sketch outline of how we think will help encourage the dialogue. I also want to discuss a little bit where we think we are in the phase of the coalition. As most of you, all of you know, we've been focusing mostly on sharing best practices and models. I think that's been very helpful in letting us know what we know, if you will, and some of the great work that some of the international organizations have been doing, and some specific proposals that work to address the threat of synthetic drugs. We've also had some interest by a number of countries to present on their experience and where they've had success. We look forward to working with co-chairs and of course to their views on how they want to incorporate this interest into future working group meetings. We have forwarded a list of draft recommendations at this point of the work of different coalition sub-working groups. These will be discussed at a meeting of co-chairs and sub-working group co-chairs March 6 and 7. So we will very much look forward to the reactions to these recommendations, improvements, additions. We hope you'll have a chance to share the recommendations with your government in advance of the March 6 meeting. But we also understand that might not in all cases be possible, and other recommendations will develop. So the website, which, as I mentioned, where the website link will be a good place to find out more information about that, as well as later recommendations. And with that, I turn it over. Oh, sorry, I wanted to give a brief example of what a recommendation might look like. One example, and in particular, this comes out of the Coalition Working Group 2, was to adopt new innovative drug data collection techniques. And 2 initiatives that have been discussed include the Web App Assist screening tool and wastewater analysis. a possible summary of achievements to consider might be something like you see here, where a number of states adopt it and adopt one or the other tool. And again, the outcome would be that the drug use trends are better detected and policy decisions can be made based on that. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to our very esteemed co-chairs, and we appreciate all the work they and the international organization points of contact are doing to make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and welcome everybody, and hello, Diego. We will begin with a presentation from the UN, from Perkha Ahmed, on exploring the UN toolkit on synthetic drugs. Today we'll have 3 presentations, and then please kind of take note of any comments and questions, and we'll have time for discussion after all 3 of those have concluded. But we'll begin with Perkha.
Hi, thanks so much, Claire. So my name is Perkha Ahmed. I work with the UNODC synthetic drug strategy, and I will be talking about the UN toolkit on synthetic drugs. And since the theme here is information sharing and interagency collaboration, I would note that information sharing and interagency collaboration are central components to the UN toolkit on synthetic drugs. And essentially, the toolkit was born out of the idea that there is the UNODC synthetic drug strategy, but what tools are available to implement this strategy? And the realization was that actually there are many tools. However, they're across the UN system, and the toolkit was created so that all these tools can come together in one place on one website. The toolkit currently has over 400.
My sincerest apologies. The interpreters are asking you to slow down, please. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Of course. So the toolkit currently has 400 resources, and they're available across the toolkit in different modules. We have 12 modules currently in the toolkit, and they're constantly evolving. We're constantly adding and updating the tools that exist on there. Accessibility is a key part of the toolkit. So the toolkit is free to access, and the majority of resources on there are open resources. So I think for the exception for a few, you can usually access them without any other requirements. The toolkit is also available in 6 languages, so all the official UN languages. And the toolkit has been accessed by over 124,000 users from 203 countries. With that, I will actually share my screen now so you can see the toolkit for yourself. The best way to access the toolkit is through the Synthetic Drug Strategy website, which is an easy one to remember. It's syntheticdrugs.unodc.org. Here you have information about the strategy as well as the UN toolkit itself in the various languages. Here you come to the landing page for the toolkit, and once you're here, you'll notice that actually the toolkit offers more than just the resources itself. What we also offer is opportunities to engage directly with experts through our Ask an Expert page. Here, since we develop each of the modules with experts from the various UN agencies, we also invite toolkit users to submit questions here, which we then share with the experts, and they provide an answer in a timely fashion. Along the same line, we also have what we called Ask the Expert Lives. And these are live consultation sessions with the experts where users can submit their questions, and the experts usually have a conversation, provide answers on the spot. Lastly, we have the community here, and you can join it here directly on the page. And the idea is to facilitate collaboration between toolkit users. So what we found is often over the years of running the toolkit that often users will reach out and find resources, but that they would like to also connect with other users who might be using the same resources in the same way. And so we thought this would be a great opportunity to bring them all together. And this is a recently launched initiative, so I highly encourage to register here on the page. Now coming to the toolkit itself, you can click here and you will find the 12 modules that we have at the moment. Given today's discussion, I'll be talking about two in particular. One is the legal module that we have here, and one is a newly launched module, which actually isn't even on the page yet because it will be launched in a few days on PPPs, which I'll walk you through. So coming here to the legal module, you'll see that this is the landing page, and most of the modules have a similar structure where you have an overview summarizing the content of the module itself, as well as various subsections with questions to guide you through the relevant resources. In the legal module, we have a subsection on international drug control systems. Here you can look at how psychoactive substances are placed under international control. Here we have a resource, an e-learning course from SGB. And this is a free course where you can go through videos and bookmark also the videos and continue where you've started. Going back, we also have resources on explaining the scheduling procedures right here, and the guide itself and the C&D. And then the role of WHO and INCB also provided here. Also information from WHO about their evaluation process. And many of the resources that you'll find here also can be directed to other modules in the toolkit. In this case, we have a separate module on precursors, and you can access information on scheduling procedures related specifically to precursors in this module. Returning to this page, we also have information on provisional and temporary controls. Here you can access work detailed information on pages 6 and 7. Returning to the landing page of the legal module, we also have national legislative approaches. Here you can see at the various national approaches that are taken. You also have a sample scenario of possible legal approaches, and then you have an interactive map here on the different legislative approaches. It's a really great map. It takes some time to load, but it's a good one. You can also see the overview on our early warning page on the various legal responses, and it's a great database where you can filter through the years, the regions, countries, and the type of legislation. Lastly, we have guidance for prosecutors and judges. This is a guideline developed by UNODC's Crimjust. This is a restricted guideline, so you just need to request access from Crimjust itself at crimjust@un.org. And on this topic specifically, we have another module called Advanced Investigative Techniques, and this goes in greater detail on this topic. You can also find information on the legal basis for controlled deliveries, as well as conducting a controlled delivery operation. And as I mentioned, we have a new module coming out that focuses specifically on public-private partnerships. And this is this module. It's a big topic that you all must know. And we've divided it into 3 subsections. The first subsection delves into sort of the fundamentals on how to define a PPP. We offer resources from IMF, the World Bank Group, that offers various definitions that are used in the international community. We also highlight benefits and limitations of PPPs within the scope of synthetic drugs. Here we offer several resources, another one from the World Bank Group, this APM-G PPP certification guide. This is also a website that you can access. It includes a free online training, as long as PDFs and embedded access to the various modules itself. Then, using these as resources, we've also offered various outlines of benefits and limitations. So these are also highlighted in this e-learning module from UNESCAP. And it includes a module that goes into greater details about the benefits and limitations and also provides a case study. I'll just quickly open it up so you can have a look. Yeah, so you might need to zoom in a bit, but they have various PPP modules, and the first one focuses specifically on benefits and limitations. Coming back, then we have the legal mandates itself for PPPs in addressing synthetic drugs at the international level. And here we went to a compendium compiled by the UNODC Drug Research Section that highlights the various legal mandates that support international PPPs on an international level. We have them highlighted here. You can also access the documents directly through these links. On the second subsection, we focus on development, and here we kind of focus on 3 key aspects of the development of PPPs, and that's the identifying and screening, establishing a framework, and structuring and awarding contracts. Here, when you go to the identifying and screening, we outline the various objectives to identifying and screening process, as well as actually conducting the identification and screening process. And again, here you'll see that APMG PPP certification guide with a chapter that focuses specifically on that. That also includes an example outline of what a screening report would look like. You also have a project screening and analytic tool from the World Bank Infrastructure Finance PPP and Guarantees Global Practice. And again, a lot of the tools, especially from the World Bank, are focused on infrastructure, but we found that on a fundamental level, they're applicable.
I'm very sorry, interpreter is asking you to slow down again. Thank you so much.
Sure, of course. And then the last one is this resource on guidance and tools for assessing PPP projects in developing countries. And here you focus on the value for money for a PPP partnership, and it provides a guide, a step-by-step guide on how to do this. Looking at establishing frameworks, we have reasons for a PPP framework, which are outlined here, as well as key components of a PPP framework in this reference guide. We also have recommendations and instituting a PPP framework itself. And at the very bottom, we have tools for assessing an actual framework, and it provides guidelines on ensuring the sustainability of efforts and also various point systems that you can use to assess these frameworks within the context of a specific country or project. In the third section of this development phase, we have the structure and awarding of contracts. You have an overview here of the contract process, as well as an overview of the type of contract types. Lastly, one topic that we briefly touch on is addressing corruption and the public perception of corruption in terms of awarding PPP deals. And this guidebook in chapter 2.6 delves into this topic. And then we have the last section of the PPP module, which focuses on the implementation. And in this section, we focus into more sector-specific concerns. And this was obviously a very big topic. And what we found was every module in the toolkit could have been addressed in this section. However, we focused on 4 in particular: 1 on the diversion of synthetic drugs, 1 on safe handling and disposal, 1 on prevention and treatment, and the last one on money laundering. Looking at the diversion of synthetic drug precursors, here on top, we find ways that PPPs could be implemented in this context, as well as resources on the bottom. So here we highlight a resource from INCB, and then we have another resource from UNODC in the path forward. And as noted in the other modules, we have relevant modules from precursors and access to diversion that also address these issues in further detail. On safe handling and disposal, again, we have the list here of ways that PPPs can be implemented to address this issue. And we have a resource from the World Bank on solid waste services and disposal of substances. Again, here, a relevant module is the forensics module, where we go into further detail on safe handling and disposal. On prevention and treatment, we highlight, again, 6 different ways that PPPs could be implemented. And we highlight a resource specifically from the Path Forward again that focuses on this topic. And then we also have modules on prevention and treatment and care that we developed with our colleagues here at UNODC who work on prevention and treatment and WHO to provide these resources in greater detail. And the last one is on money laundering. Here we offer 5 different examples of ways PPPs can effectively address this issue, as well as a resource again from the Path Forward that delves into combating the proceeds of trafficking. And then we have a relevant module here on cybercrime, which I will just quickly open up so you can see there's much more detail and resources that specifically delve into money laundering methods, and cryptocurrencies. And the last point I would like to note is that the toolkit itself, obviously you can visit the toolkit and visit these resources through the various modules, but we also offer a library. And when you visit the library, you're welcome to select the module that you're interested in. Here, open it up and see the various resources. Here you can also see the languages that they're available in, who's organized it, and the publication, and directly open it from the link. And that's all for me. Sorry for being fast.
Gracias, estimada Perkha, muy amable por tu presentación. Indudablemente, pues agradecer esta socialización y recorrido que nos haces en esta herramienta interactiva desde las Naciones Unidas, la cual pues, muestra diferentes documentos, información de interés para los actores que trabajamos en esta temática de drogas. En este segundo espacio y como penúltima presentación de nuestra jornada, queremos hacer la presentación de Giovanna Campello desde el área de las Naciones Unidas contra las drogas y el delito, prevención, tratamiento y rehabilitación, en su presentación de iniciativa, entrenamiento a miembros de gobierno. Tiene la palabra, estimada Giovanna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear co-chairs and colleagues and participants. Thank you so much for giving me the floor and the opportunity to present on our work that we do with policymakers. Let me share the screen. And well, no, maybe not the entire screen, but my presentation. If you can nod when you start seeing the presentation, I can see. I can see. Thank you so much. So as I was mentioning to you, what I would like to do in the next few minutes is to tell you a little bit about our seminars, trainings, dialogues, call them as you want, that UNODC has been implementing for many years with policymakers on the nature, prevention, and treatment of drug use and drug use disorders. And to just to let you know, to make the presentation a bit nicer to look at, I have interspersed our slides with some pictures that Nick Danzinger, a renowned photographer, has taken for UNODC in the drug treatment services that we have been working with in the context of our initiative. So this is, for example, from Latin America, but let me move to the seminars. The seminars start from the premise that policymakers must and can make a difference. We have developed a tool in 2016. We are updating it continuously. It went through one major revision already. And the tool aims to strengthen the motivation and the commitments of policymakers towards the healthy and safe development of children and the protection and promotion of health, especially of people who use drugs and people with drug use disorders. And In this context, we really are advocating for an approach based on science that understands the health nature of drug use disorder as a multifactorial health disorder that can be prevented and treated and should not be punished. And the tool is tailored towards policymakers with key decision-making responsibilities in all sectors. So we really start from the premise that it's better if policymakers from all sectors, health, law enforcement, counter-narcotics, education, youth, etc., sit around the table together, and together think about how best to address the issue of drugs in their home country. In our tool, we really, as I was mentioning, are aiming at disseminating an understanding based on science, based on public health, based on human rights. And in a nutshell, for us, this is to apply the standards that have been published by UNODC and WHO on both prevention and treatment, and disseminate their understanding and their application to policy. And this gives you an idea of the training topics, and I will run through them quickly, but then I want to highlight a couple of points. So the topics start from an understanding based on science of the vulnerabilities to the initiation of drug use and to the progression of to drug use disorder. And on that basis, they build an understanding based on science of prevention interventions and policies. What you don't see here is also the topics look at an understanding based on science of drug use disorders, their characteristics as a chronic health disorder that is characterized by a relapse. And on that understanding, it presents evidence-based treatment, both pharmacological and psychosocial. It presents interventions for the prevention of health and social consequences of drug use and drug use disorders, what some countries call harm reduction. And then discusses a system approach to policy development that connects to the international drug control system, to human rights commitments, and the dignity of individuals, not forgetting, of course, gender consideration. And there is a specific section that looks at treatment of persons with drug use disorders in contact with the criminal justice system, and specifically promoting the use of alternatives to conviction or punishment where applicable. And here you see an example from one of our treatment centers of pharmacological treatment. This is, of course, opioid agonist maintenance treatment. Global impact of our work, we have been able to reach more than 1,800 policymakers in more than 60 countries, and we really promote equal participation of women and men policymakers in our work. And as you can see, we have been able to reach a good average of female participation, just above the 50%. And here you can see a breakdown of how many policymakers we have been able to reach during the years. But what I would like to bring to your attention is that not only these policymakers were representing all sectors that are necessary for a balanced and public health approach to policy making in a country, but also all levels. So we have been working with federal levels, we have been working with state level, district level, municipal level, depending on the country, on their needs. We have been able to work with policymakers at very different levels and do so effectively. Also, in some countries, we have been able to work with parliamentarians, which we think is a huge investment. Of course, parliamentarians tend to suffer from a large rate of turnover, but at the same time, they are the ones making the laws. And they are an important ways of disseminating evidence-based practice. Here you can see an example of the kind of evidence-based psychosocial intervention that we were able to work with in some countries, specifically family therapy. And the important thing is that we use these seminars to really work with policymakers in drafting cross-sectional action plans to put in practice what we have discussed. And we do follow up after the meeting, after the seminar, highlighting the action plan that was agreed upon and trying to support member states to make it a reality. Here again, you can see a wonderful example of evidence-based treatment based on support and empathy, as opposed to punishment. And here I'm giving you some examples of global impact. So first of all, one thing that I would like to underline is that the seminar provides a lot of information that is aimed at changing attitudes. So that we measure pre and post with the participants. We see whether key ideas have been absorbed and some attitudes have been changed. But also at the same time, we are very realistic. It's not like in 3 minutes, in 3 days of seminar, we think we can change the world. But at the same time, we have, with our follow-up, we have been able to observe that ideas have been picked up and have become a reality. And what you see on the slide are examples where, for example, in one country, one of the participants reported that together with UNODC, our UNODC local office and civil society organization, a draft legislation to redirect drug user to treatment services was developed. Or in another country, they were planning to review policies for both prevention and treatment to be more inclusive. Or in another country, some of the stakeholders had started to collaborate with prison department, which had not been happening earlier, and is a good basis for better services for people who use drugs and people with drug use disorder in prison settings. So we do have some good impact here. On this slide, I show you some of our seminars. As you can see, we have done many in person, but of course, many also online. And what I would like to leave you with is to think about these seminars, really. That's why I was mentioning the word dialogue before. It's a dialogue, and it's about changing hearts and minds and moving from an approach to drugs that is stigmatizing and punitive to one that is based on science, one that promotes health for everybody, for children, youth, people, communities, families, people who use already, people with drug use disorder, people that want to be or are already in recovery. And always do this respecting dignity and human rights. And with this, I would like to thank you. I hope I have given you some idea of some of the wonderful work that we are able to achieve. And I don't want to take the credit. All the credit goes to our wonderful participants. And if you're interested to know more, I am here available for questions and further clarification. Many, many thanks.
Thank you, Giovanna. Very, very helpful. We'll move on to our final presentation and then open the floor for discussion and questions. Greg, are you here to talk to us about the International Network for Legislation on Illicit Drugs?
And Greg's presentation is going to be recorded. We are ready to play the video if you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So,
colleagues, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world listening to this presentation. Welcome. My name is Greg D'Alessandro, and I'm an official with the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs with the U.S. Department of State. And I'm pleased to be here with you to discuss a new initiative that we are calling INLID, the International Network for Legislation on Drugs, that will be implemented by our partners at UNODC and OAS-CCAT. The overarching goal of INLID is to create an international legislative network to address the threat of synthetic drugs. Now, as anyone who has been participating on these sub-working group calls over the past few months knows, synthetic drugs has changed the drug trade. The evolution from plant-based to synthetic drugs has been significant and fast-moving. What used to require acres and acres of land to produce poppies, cannabis, or coca for cocaine now only needs a small lab. Chemicals and their precursors are easy to obtain, they're inexpensive, and only a basic understanding, likely at the university level, of chemistry is needed to produce these synthetic drugs. They are so potent that only a small amount is needed, making smuggling easier, and they are so addictive that drug dealers are putting them in other drugs to hook customers, and they are extremely profitable. The novel and fast-moving nature of synthetic drug markets presents unique challenges for policymakers, and as transnational criminal organizations change their strategies, we need to adapt, and that includes adapting our legal systems. While addressing the manufacture and trafficking of illicit drugs is of paramount importance to global public health and security, it is crucial to acknowledge the existing gap between policymaking expertise and legislation in this domain. The novel and fast-moving nature of synthetic drugs presents unique challenges for policymakers who may lack the requisite knowledge and expertise to formulate effective responses. We spend considerable time and effort working with law enforcement and health experts to address this problem, primarily from our own respective executive branches. But we need to start being better, start better engagement with our legislatures and other lawmakers to ensure appropriate, effective, up-to-date laws are on the books. As the drug trade evolves, so too must our legal responses. In conversations with representatives from countries worldwide, we have heard a common refrain: if only there was a law. This evolution of illicit drug trade towards the manufacture and trafficking of synthetic drugs requires a review of our respective countries' laws to ensure they provide law enforcement, prosecutors, health officials, and others the tools they need to effectively respond. Actors involved in the drug policy making or implementation state can work with legislatures to craft legal landscape that would help in the fill the possible gaps in the global legal architecture. In our discussions and looking at laws, it's very clear that many countries lack legislation to dispose of seized drugs and chemicals according to scientific best practices, e.g., in some cases, don't burn or bury, you need to neutralize with other chemicals. Public health systems lack resources for drug prevention and treatment services, One model for increasing funds is to allocate some proceeds from drug seizures to national drug treatment and prevention systems. Some countries are not able to require certification credentialing of their addiction workforce because of the lack of legislation to identify the field as a unique multidisciplinary medical field, despite 70 years of research supporting competencies for the addiction workforce. So here we are with a global initiative run by UNODC and OASCCAD. The creation of a knowledge-based platform for lawmakers, policymakers, and their professional staff to collaborate, generate, and share best practices, legislation, and relevant information on drug-related legislation across the globe. The goal is to remedy the many deficiencies in policymaking expertise related to synthetic drugs through a multifaceted and sustainable approach. We can do so by developing model law guidance, establishing a network of policymakers, convening an annual forum, and establishing academic partners to support the next generation of policymakers. UNODC will launch a global network for INLID, while OASCCAD will launch what we're calling the LAC INLID, the first regional segment of INLID for Latin American and the Caribbean. UNODC will then work with other regional entities to launch future regional components. What can you do? First of all, I recommend that I direct you to www.globalcoalition.us, our website, where you can go to our initiatives page and learn more about INLID there. You can register your interest, whether it's in specific to the LAC INLID or a potential future regional component of INLID. Register your interest, and then identify law and policy makers who can serve as champions or leaders for this cause. Doing any or all of those things would be greatly helpful in moving this forward. So I just want to end by saying thank you. My contact information is there below. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and take care.
This is the end of the recorded presentation.
Muchas gracias, estimado Greg, por tu presentación. En este espacio, en este momento, queremos, pues, indudablemente, pues, escucharlos a ustedes, si tienen preguntas, si tienen comentarios, y aprovechar la asistencia de nuestros expositores para atender estas inquietudes que se tengan.